This atheist professor mocks John Lennox because he says, we don't need religion. We have science. But John's response is pure gold. Let's watch.
Science deals with real questions. Science deals with questions for which there is evidence. Whereas a typical religious question might be, what is the purpose of the universe? Science can dismiss that as an irrelevant question. There is no evidence that there is any purpose in the universe. One major question is, why is there something rather than nothing? It certainly seems as though there is something, and we presume that before there was something, there was nothing. So it seems to be a real question, and science has as its objective an attempt to answer that kind of question. And there is no reason other than pessimism to expect that science will grind to a halt and not answer all the real great questions of existence.
Thank you very much. So an emphatic yes to the idea that in principle science can explain everything that's worth explaining in that sense. So John, same question to you. Can science explain everything?
You're going to be surprised at how much I agree with Peter, because the definition of science he offered us, that is collecting evidence, making observations, if that's what we mean by science, and it's the old meaning of science before the 19th century, then of course science can explain everything, because the very word explanation means making evidence-based observations and notes. So my short answer is, if we accept Peter's first definition, then I agree with him entirely. Science, by definition, explains everything. And when people these days say science can explain everything, they're not referring simply to making observations and comparing notes at all. For instance, that would apply to any historical or forensic examination. And my faith as a Christian is based precisely on the kind of scientific reasoning that Peter has set forward to us. Let me just say, by the way, that from the Christian perspective, Luke, the writer of the third gospel, tells us that that is exactly what his method was. He consulted people, he made observations, and then he put them together. So we'll call that science one. What is, of course, at stake today is the question, can the natural sciences answer every question? And there I think that that is simply not the case. The Nobel Prize winner, Peter Medawar, he said, we do science a disservice, natural science, if we think it can address any questions. And he referred to the basic questions of Karl Popper, the questions of a child. Where do I come from? Where am I going? What is the meaning of life? Natural science doesn't answer questions like that. And Medawar added it is to religion, philosophy, and so on, that we must go to answer those questions. I think science is immensely powerful. It is immensely exciting, and it uncovers a vast amount about our universe. But I have a problem by going too far. I'm a mathematician, and I'm rather interested in logic. And if we say that science can explain everything, or science is the only way to truth, as it's often put, well, that is not a statement of science. It's a statement of belief. And so if it's true, it's false. Maybe it's too early in the evening for logic like that, but
I hope you caught what Professor Atkins did there and how John Lennox did not let him escape. He begins by saying that science can explain everything, and then immediately dismisses questions like, why are we here? Where are we going? Where did I come from? As irrelevant questions, so that science doesn't have to answer them, because he knows that science can't answer them. So you want to say science can explain everything, but it can't explain everything. So the things it can't explain, let's throw those away so that it can explain everything that's relevant. And John Lennox is like, no, you're not going to get away with that, because these are questions we are all asking. Why does a child want to know where they've come from? Why do we want to know where we're going? Why do we want to know how we got here? Why do we want to know what the meaning of life is? Why do we want to know about these things? And universities around the world, especially in the UK, are full of professors like Atkins who make you feel stupid for believing in a creator, believing in Jesus, but can't give you a logical reason as to why we ask these questions. But the arrogance didn't stop there. In fact, it gets worse.
Well, there's so much nonsense to hack away from.
This may be the phrase of the evening, yes.
Yeah. Let's go to what you called the core of your approach, which is the resurrection of Jesus. Never happened. I mean,
Well, that's an assertion, Peter. What about some evidence?
well, what about some evidence that it did happen, other than people who are writing Gospels of 80 years later than the event that they purport to be talking about? No, of course it didn't happen. How could it happen? And science, I think, could even go so far as saying it simply could not happen. When you've got a dead body, it's decaying straight away. There's no way that it's going to reconstitute in some way. It's absurd. And I accept that it is the foundation of Christian faith. That doesn't mean to say that it's true. And so let's dismiss that as something that simply has no evidence whatsoever of any credible
Before we
nature.
dismiss it, let's hear a response from John, because obviously this is an important issue. What counts as evidence and what are the assumptions
and indeed,
we make?
I suppose you would argue that science cannot explain the resurrection.
Well,
I wouldn't quite argue that way. I would say that science cannot forbid a resurrection. Because you see, science proceeds on discovering the regularities to which nature works and has done a very impressive job. And the fact that we know that dead bodies don't normally rise, that is a law of nature in that sense, means that we recognize something very special happened, if it did happen. But the point is this. C.S. Lewis long ago told a little analogy. If I stay in a hotel tonight, put £100 in a drawer, and do the same tomorrow night, there are £200 in it. 1 + 1 = 2. If on the third morning I find 50 quid, what do I say? That the laws of arithmetic have been broken or the laws of England? Clearly, I say the laws of England have been broken. How do I know? Because the laws of arithmetic have not been broken. It's our recognizing of what normally happens that helps us to see an exception. Now, if I were claiming that the body of Jesus rose from the dead by processes, natural processes going on in the grave 5 minutes before we happened, yes, that would be wrong. But I'm not claiming that. What Christians claim is that the God that created the universe and built the regularities into it is capable...
Pure speculation.
Wait a minute. No, this is
not worth listening.
This isn't speculation.
Well, let's listen and then you respond, Peter.
Peter, it's dead easy to say it's not worth listening to. You tempt me to say that about some of the things you say, but I'm not going to do that because it seems to me it's very important to listen to what Christianity claims before you judge it. And what is claimed is the God who creates the universe and sustains it is not subject to laws as if they were laws of a land. He set up the regularities and he can feed a new event into them. And the claim is, and with this I finish, that God raised Christ from the dead by an input of colossal power.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, you've got it, Peter, in one.
Again, isn't it so interesting how the guy that says science can explain everything doesn't have an explanation for the evidence we actually have, so he just wants to throw the evidence out and not critically engage in it. How ironic. Instead of him to say, well, how do we answer the evidence that we have? How do we respond to the eyewitness testimony that we have? How do we make sense of it? What happened? Instead, he just takes the easy route and says, it couldn't happen, therefore it didn't happen. We don't need to think about what took place. But of course, we know that the laws of nature cannot determine or prevent those laws of nature being suspended because they're the laws of nature. If there is a supernatural being, then that supernatural being is able to suspend those laws. Now, you might think that's silly, but then a question. If only things that regularly and naturally occur can never take place, how did the universe even begin? I mean, we're here now, right? How often are universes created? People have this idea of the multiverse theory, which again has no evidence of it. So the fact that something supernatural, like the beginning of the universe, could take place shows that things outside of natural laws can take place. So if that's the case, you can't just shut down the resurrection. You have to critically engage in the evidence. Of course, the best evidence is the eyewitness testimony of the disciples. But why should we trust the eyewitness testimony? We always hear that the disciples, they wouldn't die for a lie. Well, I actually want to give you one of those stories to really put into perspective what would have taken place so you can make up your mind for yourself. James, the brother of Jesus, according to Josephus, who was a Jewish non-Christian historian from the 2nd century, said that James was called to the high priest at the time, high priest Ananus. And because he was a breaker of the law, he was stoned. What was his crime? His crime was being a follower of Jesus. And that was forbidden by the Jews because it was seen as taking them away from the one true God of the Old Testament, the God of Moses, Abraham, Jacob, etc. So all James had to do in order to survive was literally say, do you know what? Fine, I reject Jesus. Jesus didn't rise again. I'm sorry. He could have continued believing this in his heart, and yet he maintained his testimony. Now, James, someone who says he saw Jesus, why would he do that if he was not convinced it was true and knew it was worth giving his life for? If James knew this was a lie, and all he had to do to the high priest is just say the words and it's all good, why would he continue even to the point of being stoned? I wonder if Professor Atkins can give me a logical reason as to why James may have done this. Or is he just going to throw this and all the other evidence out of the window as well because he doesn't really want to deal with it? Now, this is not the first time an atheist has dismissed the Christian faith and not really dealt with the evidence as it deserves to be dealt with. But to see another Christian brilliantly handle that, check out the video on your screen. I know you'll be blessed by it. I'll see you there. Peace and blessings.